Hi, thanks for reaching out. I wanted to make a video because it's so much easier than typing everything out. But in the email, I think I'll send you my notes so you can see the links to everything. So I'm going to show you three different things. One is the library subscribes to newspaper databases. And while all the newspapers in the United States haven't been digitized, a lot of them go back to kind of like 1995. So we should be able to find a good body of representation from all over the United States about this. But I'll also show you digitized newspaper projects where some of the smaller town papers get in there, and I think this will really help. And Wyoming just initiated one, so we'll see what's in there. I haven't searched. And then lastly, I'll show you how to look through online archives where people have kept things, and it might be more primary sources, but we'll dig around and see what's available in there. This is fascinating to me as a librarian because I remember this happening, and the date was 1998. I'm looking at my notes over here. Date was 1998, so digitization of things was happening from, so this is like early internet, but also retroactively people are taking what used to show up just in print. People have saved these, or institutions have saved them, like the Salt Lake Tribune. We just digitized a bunch of their stuff. And even though they're holding copyright, they're still kind of like opening it up to the public. So it's kind of this pseudo weird thing going on. So hopefully your research will benefit from this. I think it will. So first one, library newspapers databases. You could type in San Francisco Chronicle, Salt Lake Tribune, Denver Post, but a lot of these are wrapped up in databases. And if you go to databases by type and go to newspapers, I'll show you a list of my favorites. There's tons in here. So some of these, a lot of these trend towards the last 20 years, so it might be missing what we're looking for. But there's some of my favorite ones are in here. I would say cruise through these and see what you're interested in. I have a guide, which I was just showing students, or I will be showing students today. And I'll show you some of the greatest hits. And I'll put this URL in here. I'm doing a class today on news writing, so I'll put that URL in the see a list here. So my favorite ones, these are all the databases from that I thought might be relevant for this newspaper class. The big one for current papers is US News Stream. Let me show you that one briefly, and then I'll show you some of these historic ones. So this is most of the newspapers in the United States. But how far back it goes depends on the paper. So you could go in and say, I want to see the Deseret News or the Salt Lake Tribune, and it'll give you a date range. Deseret News. And you just click on Deseret News, and it'll say, okay, this one only goes back to 2003. How do you do that in a bigger search? I'm just going to look for Shepard. Spelling counts. So if you misspell Shepard, you're only going to get the articles where somebody misspelled this person's name. And I'm going to do Wyoming or Laramie just to add the location, because I think that was often a big part of it. So they were focusing on the rurality. Is that a word? When you look at these things, this is going to be a lot of stuff from the API, UPI, news wires, and things like that, where newspapers are sharing a lot of articles. Let me show you how to drill down. Oh, man. So it's still having an effect even this year. That's so funny to hear that Texas is restricting information, he said sarcastically. If you go to publication title, you can narrow down to these newspapers, just like we did with that Deseret News. So we have, let's see, is there Business Wire? Yeah, here's University Wire. So this is somebody who is just making news and distributing it to a bunch of people. But if you want to narrow it down to a particular paper, you can. But if we narrow down to just the Wyoming Tribune, out of Cheyenne, trying to, oh, there we go. How far back does it go? Oh, okay, so this one goes back to 1997. So these are things you have to be aware of and be careful of. You can get a citation. All of these are full text. The citations are often incorrect, but they're like a good start. Like for example, in most recent styles, you don't put in like the whole thing. You would just do ProQuest.com. Be that as it may, let's go back. Nexus Uni is not unlike this, and they license a lot of the similar newspapers. But if you really want to dig in, this is a great place to go. This one includes other things like legislation, context of debate, court cases, and things like that. So you can go in, and there's a whole bunch of other things going on. But if you just want to go to the news, you could do advanced search and go into by publication. This one is a little clunkier for me, but the communication faculty adore Nexus Uni, so let me know if that's one you're interested in. To go into a historical newspaper, these are complete runs that are like the deep catalog of these major titles. But we also have Denver Post. So if you don't find what you're looking for in these earlier papers, then go back into that newspapers sorting, and you should find the Denver Post. Because I remember when we bought that. Denver Post archive. Oh, that one's current. So you might want to go into that one. Okay, let's transition to smaller papers. So smaller papers might be things that wouldn't have the value, or they've been discontinued, community-based papers that would show up in these areas. A lot of them are old, but the newer ones are starting to come in. So it helps to go and see where Laramie is. And I was like, okay, so Colorado papers are going to be a huge deal. And I thought Nebraska might be, but I would wager that most of Nebraska's population is going to be over in the green. But how do we find these things? I will show you. I have a search, so you can do, let's see, let's just call it digital newspapers, Utah. You'll get a link for this. Or if you switch it over to Colorado, you get these. So these are kind of like newspapers that have been digitized. And I'll send you a link to the one that I found for Wyoming too. But if you go into this one, so now when you get into these, the databases are weaker. And the text, when they're like scanning old newspapers from print, sometimes the text is a little wonky. But you can do, I think this one might be better to do Matthew's name in quotes. So instead of looking for Matthew here and Shepard there, it will get it tied together. And I'll just do, maybe I won't do Wyoming, maybe I will. Wyoming or Laramie. And it's like all these newspapers, and many of them are old, but the newer ones are starting to trickle in. So you could narrow down, you could come up to 1997. Did that work? It did. So we have the Ogden Standard Examiner, Provo Daily Herald, all these papers that are still protected by copyright, but they negotiated these so people could actually see them online. So let's see what the Provo Daily Herald says. So this is where you're going to get, so Provo Daily Herald does not show up in the Nexus Uni or the US news stream. But this might come from, I mean, look at this. This is almost like a side note. There's no interview, there's no quotes. It's just somebody from Missouri making a statement on it. So that probably came from a newswire. But dig around in these, and you might find something much more valuable than these newswires. But you might have to do a little bit of digging. And I'll send you the links. But if you, so Utah has one, Wyoming has one, Colorado has one. But if you're interested, there's probably archives elsewhere. Let me show you how to find those. If you do a search for archives, Matthew Shepard Wyoming. Oh, Lord. When you do a search like this, what it's going to do in Google, let me show you bigger then, so you don't have to do this. In smallness. In Google, if you do a word followed by a colon, then everything you type after that will be emphasized in the context of that first word, if that makes sense. So when I do Matthew Shepard Wyoming without archives, it's just going to give me kind of like Wikipedia and everything. But in this one, it's going to look specifically at, there's like a web archive. So somebody who did this. So the American Heritage Center at the University of Wyoming collected websites. And you can reach out to them. They even have an email. So content description, they captured 70 websites and archived this. Isn't that wild? This is, I would not have expected that. So this might be a treasure trove for you. Let me go back. So that might be the same one. So Wyoming History Day, there's a Matthew Shepard collection. This is probably something that you maybe already found. This looks like just statements from community leaders. There's the Matthew Shepard Foundation. There's papers that are found in a Smithsonian archives. So isn't that fascinating that all these people have collected stuff and now that digitization is coming back in? Oh God, they even have his diploma. Oof, okay. So another thing you can do is change up archives for newspapers, and this is where you might find other papers talked about as well. If you find a citation, oh, here's the Guardian. That's like a British paper, I think. The Wyoming Truth, is that a paper? So there's all sorts of different bits and pieces you can find where people are trying to have an impact, but it's only very, very, very localized. If you come across anything that you don't know how to get access for, reach out to me. But if you have a citation for it, you can get it through interlibrary loan for free. All you need is that citation. It takes about a day or so, even if it's like coming from microfilm. We also have archivist librarians who can reach out. So I had an archivist librarian work with me and another student where we reached out to Oxford University library to get access to some doctor's papers or something like that. So you have access to this as well. Let me know how it goes and take care of yourself. If this becomes so subjective that you get overwhelmed, that is a feature of doing research like this. And take a break and try and maintain objectivity as you go. I'm the social work librarian too, so here's my psychosocial advice on heavy research.